Thanks for checking out our podcast. If you are interested in learning more about writing, go check out our syndication page, seriouswriter.com, where you can find resources, articles, videos, topical classes, and the Brew and Ink podcast. Again, seriouswriter.com. We thank you for listening. All right, and welcome everyone back to another Brew and Ink podcast. Today you have just me and Katie here.
Hello, hello.
And Britt is going to be patching in through the airways to read his story because, unfortunately, his family caught the COVID. Mostly his wife, and she's doing better now, but she was doing pretty rough over the weekend, and they suspect that their kids probably were the ones that had it and didn't have symptoms and then gave it to her.
When I was a small child, I had strep throat for about a month without symptoms and gave it to everybody repeatedly.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, why does my throat hurt so much?
It was me.
Yep. But we are here to talk with you guys about things that we're thankful for, mostly books and movies that we are thankful to have read. Because this week is Thanksgiving. Yay!
Hey!
I like Thanksgiving just for the fact that it's a holiday where we remember to be thankful for things. I just like being able to get together with family, and it's good to be able to focus on things in your life that you can be grateful for, to have gratitude, and to be able to teach children and the future generations how to be grateful for things that they have in their life. Mm-hmm. Actually, first, I want to talk about those Hero Forge things that you were sharing with us through our little chat. But you're designing some pretty cool little characters.
Yeah.
And you can do that through just a software that's online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Hero Forge, props to them. It's online customized miniatures for your tabletop gaming needs, or like I've seen, it doesn't have to be for gaming, but super customizable, successfully backed Kickstarter, brought us color printing, and like you can download your own STL files and stuff. So I've been having a ton of fun designing my D&D characters through that.
Britt made Callie, and then he'd also made one of his characters from his book, Caleb.
Yeah.
And they were pretty cool looking.
Really sharp.
Yeah, so I need to join into the foray on that, and I need to start making some little. If we decide really cool.
If we decide to print any out, I enjoy painting minis.
Yeah.
They look okay.
Yeah, well,
but it's fun.
Yeah, and I've tried it before as well for some school projects.
Yeah.
And it is fun, but it's a really cool little resource if you want to try and imagine your characters in a 3D space or a real space that if you're writing a book or a story and you want to kind of try to see it more than just in your head. That's a good little website for you guys to go visit.
And it's all free?
Yeah, until you want to
and purchase.
Print one. Yeah. It was like, well, you said it was like $45 to print it with color?
I think so. I haven't checked the color prices.
Yeah.
STL files are typically $8.
Yeah, and that's you use an STL file for if you have a 3D printer at your house, which a lot of people may not know this. Check your local library. Some local libraries will actually have 3D printers that you can use. So if you could get one of those files, you could take it there and print.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, at least we do here in Gwinnett. We have
really, which one?
I believe it's the Five Forks Trickham.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Branch, because they've got all the nice stuff there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Never been out there. I need to.
It's really nice.
Make a field trip.
They've got a full studio that you can like rent green screens and cameras.
Wow.
And they've got 2 computers that have like all kinds of software for editing.
That is so cool.
Yeah. I was using
libraries.
Libraries, exactly.
That's where the good stuff's at.
And speaking of good stuff in libraries, that is where I spent a lot of my childhood, or at least got introduced to a lot of good books as a kid. And, you know, for me, one of the first books that I feel like I really took on as an undertaking and then thrust me into wanting to read more in fantasy and literature and all that was The Hobbit. And I just remember getting a hold of this book, and that was definitely it wasn't so much a library book as it was a scholastic book, but that's one of the first books that I remember. It was 8th grade. I was in honors English, and we actually got to choose our own books for our book report project that year, as long as it was over, I think, 200 pages. And I remember bringing this to her, and I was like, can I do The Hobbit? And she's like, yeah, it's like 500 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that. So that was one of the first books that I'm thankful for reading, because Tolkien has been a very huge just influence for me being inspired to be a writer. So that's definitely one of my first that I would, fall back on. I know I talk a lot about Tolkien and books like that, but another one that I really wanted to focus on from his stuff was the Silmarillion. And I read that after college, and I read that after I'd already read, all of the Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. I'd even read some of the smaller books like Farmer Giles and some of those other short stories that he did. But the Silmarillion really kind of bridges it all together.
Yeah.
And it's almost like ancient mythology stories, because it's like these short stories that get told over generations of lineage, essentially. And so you get like these great little romantic peers into like 2 or 3 characters within the narrative, and then they move on or they die, and it goes on to their lineage, their kids, or further down the line. And it's really cool how he did it. And he never did finish it himself. He just had a lot of notes, and he had a lot of stuff that was written. And then after he passed away, his son took on the task of finishing and compiling it all together. So it's a really cool place to explore the world of Middle Earth and all that. Even after, I would say, some people, it technically precedes all the stories. Like it's got this really cool beginning of creation story.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Iluvatar and how like all the music is kind of how creation was done, and then people started kind of putting in these off tunes or their own tunes, and that created like this discord that was kind of the beginning of evil. And so that's one of those books that really piqued my imagination and got me even back into writing, essentially, because I had gone through college and everything, and after that I was like, writing has always been something that I've just done, but I've never really focused on. I've never really took it on as something that I'm called to do. But after reading that book, that was kind of when I was like, you know what? I need to go at this with a new perspective, a new fervor in life.
Yeah. I'm one of the people that has yet to read the Silmarillion in whole.
It's long, yeah.
It's long, and I've struggled with just the opening chapters for a long time.
Yeah.
But last time I attempted, I got farther than I had previously, and almost to the good stuff, I think.
Yeah. Well,
where it gets a little less technical.
Yeah, you start getting into the story of character development and all that. And I've got a really beautiful illustrated copy of it. If you want to borrow that, you could try and get through it. And then there's another book that comes out of that, The Children of Hurin, and that's a longer telling of one of the short stories in there.
Okay.
And it's just as good of a read.
Yeah. Nice. I have to look into that.
Yeah. How about you? What's something that you're kind of thankful for reading?
I think there are a couple. The big one for me is the Redwall series by Brian Jakes. I think there are almost 20 books in the series.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Maybe not quite that many, but I'm not sure. About medieval period animals living in abbeys and waging wars and stuff, and it's really cool, a really cool setting, and just a lot of the themes really resonated with me as a small child when I read these in 4th grade, I think. And but the things that came out of my reading that have had really lasting impacts, through Redwall I found a really good art community that I think really accelerated my interest in art and my skills. And I found writing RP forms, naturally, through Redwall, and made lasting like friend relationships through that. Like I still talk with several people that I met online there.
Yeah.
And actually this Saturday I made a recipe from the Redwall series. For those in the know, I made a deeper and ever pie that the moles eat with beetroot and radish, and I didn't have any parsnips, but it was heckin' delicious.
Yeah?
Yeah,
That's
worthy
so cool.
worthy of a Redwall feast.
There you go. That's fun when you can actually pull things out of the story and experience them in real life.
Yeah, I'm working on a recipe for the Otter's hot root soup with shrimp and everything, and the local Asian grocery is selling crawfish, so I think that'll go really well.
How detailed do they get into these recipes in the book, or do the people kind of extrapolate from that and then
It's more
create a recipe?
extrapolated. Like with the deeper and ever pie, we know that it's got beetroot and parsnip and a couple other tubers, turnips, I think. And just, you go off the general description and what feels good for this.
Yeah, and then you add things to tie it together to give it a full flavor. That's cool.
Made my very first herbed crust, and fantastic.
What did you use
so
to make the crust?
Flour, butter, thyme, dill, and rosemary.
Okay.
And the rest, I don't follow recipes very well, so it's definitely my own thing.
Yes.
But thyme. Did I say thyme
think
already?
you did, yeah.
Oh well,
Yeah.
lots of time.
Lots of time.
Yeah.
No, it's funny. That's how I like to cook too. I'll pick like 2 or 3 recipes, and then I'll pick the parts out of there that I think sound the best.
Yeah.
And then I do it myself.
Yeah, same. Which irritates my husband when I ask him to help me out. Can you just list me off these ingredients? And I don't pull those ingredients. So, but nothing is quite the same.
Yes,
time.
second time through. But
Other books.
I would attest to the Redwall being a big influence in your life, like especially with your art and your art style and everything. Like
I'm not a furry. I'm an anthro artist.
There you go. Yeah, it's very different. Yeah, but So yes, even not having read the Redwall series, I can see how that was a huge influence in your artistic style. But you were about to say another.
Yeah, a couple other books that fit into the naturalist theme was Annie Dillard's Teaching a Stone to Talk. My uncle gave me a copy of the book that my grandma had given him when he was in college. And Annie Dillard writes narrative nonfiction essays, just kind of contemplative, and she goes out into nature in different places and just talks about what she sees and what she thinks through that. And it's I find it very compelling, but it also put words to the stuff that I like to write. And those short vignettes, kind of thoughtful, a little pretentious at times.
Sure.
But just, narrating what I'm seeing in nature and here and there. That I love her work, and I love that my stuff is nowhere near as good, but just I found a place where my writing fits.
Yeah.
So the fiction and things that I do, that's cool and all, but the narrative nonfiction essays is, I think, what I really like writing most at the moment. And the last one is just purely for fun. There's nothing deep about it. I picked up a copy of Gerald Durrell's My Family and Other Animals while I was living in India. And it's autobiography of the naturalist Gerald Durrell when his family moved from England to the Greek island Corfu, and how they all adapted there. And I think they moved when he was 10-ish, young boy. And
but old enough to kind of already have habits established.
Habits and interests, and bringing snails and bugs and all sorts of creatures into the house. And it's just, I have never laughed so hard as I did when I read this book. And unfortunately, I didn't bring my copy with me when I left India. But the first thing I did when I got home was I bought my own.
Yeah.
And it's one that's just a perennial favorite. I read it fairly regularly and just laugh every time. So if you're looking for a good hysterically funny story,
Yeah.
set of stories, My Family and Other Animals is it. When my friend and I left India, we did a little bit of traveling and ended up in Greece. And we seriously looked at getting to Corfu, only to realize that in early spring in the off season, trying to get a ferry from Athens to Corfu is a very long and very expensive trip.
Oh, wow.
So that didn't happen, but
Yeah.
next time.
Next time. Well, that's funny. That kind of segues me into my next book that I was going to talk about. It's called Slaughterhouse-Five. And that's one. It's not really a perennial read for me, but I will pick it up every few years and read back through it. It's not very long. It's a nice thin book. Kurt Vonnegut wrote it, and he's a very interesting writer. Very interesting perspectives, and not so much vulgar as he is just realistic with certain things. But Slaughterhouse-Five is one of those where I just remember reading it, and it really spoke to me in ways, specifically with time and how time works, and it made me think about it in a way that I always kind of thought about time and existence and perspective, but it put it into words that just made it so clear that it's one of those books that you really ponder about stuff afterwards, even though throughout the whole thing it's just funny and off the wall and has quirky parts and parts where you're like, what's going on here? There's alien abduction. There's all kinds of stuff. It's wacky. It's off the wall. To give you the gist of what's happening is this guy is going through life. He was a part of World War II, I believe, and that's where the slaughterhouse part comes in.
Okay.
Is he is remembering some scenes from the war that went through there. But then after, and I'm getting things maybe out of order, but it doesn't matter because the whole book is out of order. Because what's happening is at some point in his life, he starts experiencing time non-linearly.
Okay.
So he just will all of a sudden be in a part of his life that was either in the past or the future, and he just jumps back and forth between these parts, and the book just kind of reads like that, and you never know where he's going to end up next. But there's all these little phrases that he keeps bringing back, be talking about description, and he'll end it with or so it goes.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Slaughterhouse-Five is definitely worth the read. And it's so out there compared to your normal sort of fantasy or just fiction genre. So it was one of those that I'm thankful that I've read it, and I go back and read it every few years, and it's a hoot at the same time.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Now, on more of a serious note, sort of a self-help, nonfiction type books, I've got two. One's called The Purpose-Driven Life. Read that at the end of my college years, and that really helped me kind of refocus my attention. Just those years of your life where you're like, okay, I'm graduating, now I got to find a job, what am I doing? So it kind of helped really reorient me to be like, okay, what are my habits that I'm setting up for life? What are my goals? What are, the things that I've done to, establish character and things like that. And then another one that I had a boss give to me and kind of help me take on more of leadership roles called Peaks and Valleys. And it's talking about things in life that we all experience through success and failure. It talks about these points in a narrative sort of way. So you get this narrative of this guy trying to get up to this mountaintop to see this sage, but he doesn't make it there, and then he ends up in the valley, and he's depressed, and he realizes, okay, well, everything we do in the valley is preparation to get to the peaks, and then he gets up there, and he meets the sage, and it wasn't exactly what he had expected, which talks about...
Meetings with sages never are.
Yeah, and that's what it's basically saying, is we have all these preconceived expectations, and a lot of times those expectations are what make us disappointed.
Yeah.
So it's another really short story, but those two were really good for me, just character-wise and trying to, set better goals for my own personal growth.
Yeah. Nice. Good.
So I think we will now transition to Britt's story, Chapter 9. He did a really good job with this one. Chapter 9 is called The Red Scarf, and I think you guys will enjoy it as much as we did. So here we go.
Chapter 9, The Red Scarf. Callie sighed as the sight of her ranch met her in the mid-morning sun. She shivered, huddled underneath her brown duster. The ache in her back sharpened. Was a time she could have ridden for weeks without any pain. Not now. A few hours in the saddle and her whole body protested like a mangy, starving hound on a front porch. She guided Black Claw over to the new fence she and Cecil had built for what remained of the herd. Only 11 animals, not even a dozen. She shook her head while swinging her leg from the saddle and landed gingerly on the cold, hard ground. With a chuckle, she moved her stiff limbs to tie off the saurian and forced a stagger to her home. Callie hadn't been searching for her lost saurians last night, however. She had another mission. Not a successful one. She thought that walking would loosen up the muscles in her legs. It didn't. Warmth met her when she opened the door. Her sore back stiffened again, though. Arthur stood there at her table, dressed with a rifle in his hand, his hat pressed down, his pistol at his thigh. He upended a small mug of coffee, the scent had reached her, and set it down on the table. Cecil hung back near the stove, a frown further wrinkling his leather face. Callie closed the door behind her and squinted at Arthur. "Where are you off to?" Arthur took a breath. "Town. Been gone too long. Got duties and all." "Sure. Duties," Callie said. "You also lucky to be up and moving." Arthur grinned at Cecil. "That poultice helped for sure. I always heard about that native medicine magic." Callie took a few more steps closer to the smell of coffee. "Not magic, just proven over a few hundred years." "Even so," Arthur said, "it sure helped. I'll be getting back." Cecil lifted the pot of coffee from the stove and poured a mug for her. The fire in the hearth cut the chill enough that her legs and back didn't scream at her when she trudged around the table and grabbed the mug. It was hot, even through her gloves. That man always knew what she needed. "What's the rush?" she said. "Elijah came by," Cecil said before Arthur could respond. Callie froze. Fortunate she wasn't drinking from the mug, she would have spit it all over Cecil. "What?" "Yeah," Arthur said. "While you was out talking to that investor from the Ledger, Elijah came by. Whitaker's pressing charges." Her nostrils flared. "Charges? For what?" "I wonder," Arthur chuckled. "Shooting at him? For running off his horse and Calamity Jane breaking his leg?" "I set that leg and called the doctor," Callie growled, "and I could have killed him if I'd wanted." "I know," Arthur said. "Don't seem to matter to those men, or to Whitaker. They're pressing charges, so I'll be down at my office to hear their complaint." Callie snorted before taking a sip of the hot coffee. "You gonna arrest me?" Arthur cocked his head. "Callie, I'm gonna buy you some time, what time I can, to use that ledger and talk to those investors." His lips became a line. "How did it go with Mr. Vandy?" "I told him all that Whitaker's been doing in town, and the stampede." One of Arthur's brows lifted. "And?" Another sip of coffee and she put it on the table. "And nothing. He didn't want to listen. Said stampedes happen all the time." "Not like that," Arthur said. "That's what I said." Callie shifted her weight, but he didn't hear it. Said those stampedes are the reason we should wipe out all the wild saurians. "Sorry to hear that." Arthur met her gaze. "That's why I'll be buying you some time. You talk to the investors, see if you can get them to see sense." He strode toward the door. I'm headed to my place to get a horse. Callie crossed her arms. Talk to them, Callie, Arthur said. Make them see sense. Arthur tipped his hat and left, closing the door behind him. Callie pulled out a chair and sat at the table. She removed her gloves and wrapped her hands around the mug. Think you can do it, Cal? Cecil asked. Make them see sense? Callie stared at the door. My experience, the last thing people see is a sense. After stopping at his place to make sure everything was in order, Arthur rode into town and tied his horse to the post in front of his office by mid-afternoon. More strange men had appeared in town, only a handful, but they were Whitaker's men. More shops and homes appeared deserted. Arthur entered his office, set his rifle behind the desk, and sat in the chair, groaning with relief. Less than 5 minutes later, Trace Whitaker opened the door with another man in a suit and white hat on his heels. Whitaker's leg had wooden slats on either side. Arthur clenched his teeth to keep from smiling. Well, that didn't take long, Arthur said. You've been watching me? Keeping tabs? Whitaker grinned. I happened to be in town. Sure, Arthur said. Nice to see you up and on your feet again, Whitaker said. Heard you had trouble. Nothing I couldn't handle, Arthur said, which wasn't exactly true. Now what can I do for you? Whitaker ushered the other man into the office and closed the door behind them. I believe Elijah already informed you of my intent to press charges against Miss O'Shea. Arthur inclined his head. He did. I wanted to formally press those charges today, now that you are healed and back at your job, Whitaker said, and also to introduce you to this gentleman. And who is this? Arthur asked. The man in the white hat stepped forward and extended a hand. James Brooks, Pinkerton Detective Agency. Arthur stood and shook the man's hand. Nice to meet you. Arthur pointed to the 2 chairs that faced the desk. Please sit. Arthur sat. Whitaker and Brooks followed suit, Whitaker with some difficulty, his leg out straight. Haven't seen you around here before, Mr. Brooks, Arthur said. I arrived on the noon coach from Silver City, Brooks said. Silver City, Arthur said. Hope you find our humble town hospitable enough. It's fine, Brooks said. Good. Arthur faced Whitaker. Now let's address these charges against Miss O'Shea. What are you accusing her of? Whitaker smirked. You know good and well, Sheriff. Attempted murder, personal injury, he pointed at his leg, and theft of property. What property is this? Whitaker frowned. A ledger. Important information for my business. I see, Arthur said. Were there any witnesses to this event? Whitaker straightened. No witnesses. Arthur clicked his tongue. No witnesses. So it is your word against hers? She called a doctor for me, Whitaker said through his teeth. What more evidence do you need? That she shot at you, tried to kill you, broke your leg? I'd need lots. And at least a witness, Arthur said. I mean, she say she was out gathering some roots or leaves and found you with a broken leg, called a doctor? Sounds like you should thank her. You were staying with her, Whitaker said. You saw her with the ledger, right? I didn't see a ledger, Arthur shrugged. But she was out a lot, trying to track down some of her missing herd lost during a wild saurian stampede. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that. I am a businessman, Sheriff, Whitaker said. More interested in cattle than those dangerous animals. I would know nothing. Arthur said, well, until you can get me some proof or a witness, I can't really press charges. Whitaker stared at Arthur for a long moment. I feel I should warn you, Sheriff. This is not something to be taken lightly. You should arrest that woman. If you know, what is good for you. Arthur went still, aware of the position of his right hand and the pistol at his thigh. Mr. Whitaker, are you threatening me? I'm trying to help you, Whitaker said, to keep the law, and from associating yourself with a known murderer. Arthur scowled. Excuse me? Whitaker gave a sidelong glance at Mr. Brooks. Brooks cleared his throat. Have you heard of the Red Scarf, Sheriff? No, Arthur said. Should I have? Brooks shook his head. Not necessarily. However, I find it very interesting you don't. Why is that? First, allow me to elucidate on who Red Scarf of the Wind is, or was, Brooks said. Arthur shrugged. Sure. She has quite the history, as we at Pinkerton discovered, Brooks began. Red Scarf was but a child when her parents were killed by bandits, a combination of white men and natives. A nearby tribe of natives found her and raised her. As she grew, those natives taught her what she wanted to know most. In the pause, Arthur said, and that was? How to kill, Brooks said, mostly with pistols and rifles, but also every other way. She wanted to exact her revenge, to kill those bandits. Arthur frowned. Did she? She did, Brooks said. She tracked them all down. They were older men by that point. She was 17 years old. She stalked and killed all 8 of those men. Quite the story, Arthur said. Brooks lifted a finger. Not quite the end, however. You see, Red Scarf began to like the killing. She was good at it. We all like to do the things we are good at, do we not? Arthur didn't respond. Brooks continued. She became a bounty hunter. As you know, out here, bounty hunters aren't much different from the scum they hunt. Red Scarf became legend. She retired more than a decade ago. Arthur squirmed in the chair. I say she retired, Brooks said, but in fact she ran off, disappeared. Her last known act was a crime. Arthur swallowed. What did she do? One of her native friends was convicted of murder, Brooks said. He was set to be hanged further east. Red Scarf sprung him from the jail the night before his execution. Then they disappeared. West. Arthur gripped the arms of his chair. Red Scarf would be an older woman by now, not someone you would consider a hardened killer, Brooks said. The native man she helped escape, he would be an even older man with a limp. Have you seen anyone matching those descriptions? A woman with a red scarf, good with a pistol? An older native man would be with her? Arthur froze. The smile on Whitaker's face grew slowly. Of course he has. The sheriff has been staying with her. Mr. Brooks here has informed me that Cecil is wanted in 14 counties in 2 states. 3, Brooks corrected. Sorry, 3, Whitaker nodded. For Red Scarf, there is a federal warrant for her arrest. Whitaker leaned forward. As the law of this town, it is your job to bring her to justice. Arthur sat forward as well. You think Callie is this killer? I don't think it, Sheriff, Whitaker said. I know. The sheriff narrowed his eyes. Because she has a red scarf? My grandma had a red scarf. Maybe I should dig her up and see if she fits the description. Or because Callie's good with a gun? Most of us raised out here have been trained with guns. Even some women. None of that proves she is this red scarf. Whitaker scoffed. You're arguing that Callie is some normal, everyday old woman? Normal, everyday. Arthur leveled a gaze at Whitaker. Like a wild saurian stampede, say, that common. You will do nothing? Whitaker said. I think I'll get a beer down at the saloon, Arthur said, but about Callie, nothing for now. You see, Mr. Whitaker, I am the law. And the law doesn't simply react to accusations, which is all you've given me. In order to act, the law requires proof, evidence. This red scarf is a nice story, but everyone also knows you want Callie's land for yourself, and she won't sell. Excuse me, then, if I find your accusations suspect. Until you show me hard proof, that is. Whitaker sneered. You are making a mistake, Sheriff. I'm doing my job, Mr. Whitaker, Arthur said. If I arrested people based on accusation and hearsay, you might find yourself in that jail. There are warrants, charges, descriptions, Brooks said. Arthur said, You have those with you? Brooks sniffed. They are at my office in Silver City. Ah, Arthur said. Well, bring those to me and we'll see. Until then, good day, gentlemen. Whitaker didn't move, and Arthur wondered if the man would leave. Whitaker finally struggled to his feet. Brooks followed his lead. Whitaker limped to the door and opened it. Do your job, Sheriff. His voice was low and dangerous. Or we will have to find someone who will. Whitaker and Brooks closed the door behind them. Once they were gone, Arthur's shoulders slumped. Damn.
Nicely done, Britt. Very well written. I like how you took Katie's little check from Whitaker's point of view, and then you turned it into almost another check in chess terms, I guess. But yeah, I felt like you really had us, you had Callie like right where we wanted her. And Britt
my plans have been spoiled now.
Britt was able to come in with Arthur and really write him back in as a character in our story, because he's really been in the background these past few chapters trying to heal up from severe gunshot wounds, and now he's back and he's buying Callie time.
Yep.
That's the best that he can do at this point, but he's also realizing that there's more to these two characters, Callie and Cecil, than he originally saw, or that they've not that they've been secretive about their past. They just really haven't talked about it too much. I'm excited to see where this goes, and I can definitely see how the tension is going to build up. To someone's plans are not going to go the way that they want.
Yep.
Whether it's Callie or Whitaker or Arthur, someone's gonna have to.
Gonna have to give.
Yeah, someone's gonna have to give, and we don't know what that is, but we do have a wheel of malfortune that's going to help us determine what's gonna make it harder for everyone. All right, we're gonna give it the first spin on the Wheel of Malfortune, and we are coming up on outside forces, or now these are both options that I'm gonna have to write from, one or the other. Outside forces or locals.
That brings in really neatly, what are the Pinkertons gonna do?
Yeah.
Maybe that draws back to if the local Indian tribes are threatened through this, and then the townspeople have been under Whitaker's thumb a bit. What's their reaction? What are they thinking? And
or how can he use them to his end?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he gets them riled up over the law enforcement not pulling their weight around or using them to force Arthur's hand. So you guys get to decide, What do you think would make for a more interesting story? Do you want to see more from the outside forces with the Pinkerton Detective Agency? Or do you want to see more from the locals and how those people can be used to move forward our narrative? Other than that, as always, remember to like and subscribe and check out our Instagram and Facebook pages and give Britt your well wishes. I'm sure he'll appreciate it. And we are looking forward to all being back together again after the Thanksgiving holidays. And we hope you guys all have a happy Thanksgiving. And
See you next time.
see you next time. Remember to raise that glass to inspiration and stay inspired, guys.
Is this better?
That seems to be better. Oh, yeah. If you had headphones on,
Yeah.
you would hear all of that. Aiden, I need you to take that into the family room. I'm about to say a classic dad line. Where's your mother?
Where's your brother?
She's at her house. Is this a booby trap? Are you booby trapping me?
Yeah.
I'm gonna get you.
FBI, open up. Yeah.
Kids.
Peace and quiet.
See you later.